Welcome to The Explainer. Today we're digging into something huge, the start of World War I. And we're going way beyond that simple story you always hear about a lone assassin's bullet to find out how an entire continent got so tightly wound that it was ready to just snap.
All right, so let's just jump right in, because this is the big question, right? On June 28th, 1914, one guy, Archduke Franz Ferdinand, gets shot in Sarajevo. And boom, just a few weeks later, the whole world is tangled up in the worst war anyone had ever seen. I mean, how on earth does that happen? How does it all fall apart so fast?
Well, to really get it, you've got to throw out the picture you might have of early 20th century Europe. It wasn't this collection of stable, solid countries. Nope. The reality was way, way more fragile.
And a really great way to think about it comes from the historian John Merriman. He called it a house of cards. Just imagine that. This whole continent was this tangled web of treaties, all propped up against each other, so shaky that just one little push could make the entire thing collapse.
So, what was this house of cards built on? Well, it was basically standing on two massive fault lines. Two deep, simmering rivalries that had been shaping European politics for years.
Okay, so fault line number one, France versus Germany. This was all about the territory of Alsace-Lorraine, which Germany had snatched back in 1871. France was just burning for revenge, and Germany was terrified of having to fight a war on two fronts. Then you've got fault line number two, over in the east, Russia versus Austria-Hungary. They were in a power struggle over the Balkans, and Russia had this big idea that it was the protector of all Slavic people, which, you can imagine, was a huge threat to the multi-ethnic Austro-Hungarian Empire. It threatened to basically tear it apart from the inside out.
So with all these fears and rivalries bubbling up, what do? You look for friends, right? You make alliances for security. But here's the crazy irony. The very deals they signed to try and keep the peace, they became the tripwires that guaranteed a massive, continent-wide war. So how did this whole house of cards get stacked? It really kicks off in 1879. Germany and Austria-Hungary team up in what's called the Dual Alliance, mainly to keep Russia in check. But of course, that just freaked out France and Russia. It actually backfired and pushed this Republican France into a really unlikely alliance with autocratic Russia in 1894. And the final piece? Great Britain. They'd always kind of stayed on the sidelines, splendid isolation and all that, but they got so worried about Germany's new, powerful navy that they finally jumped in with France and Russia. And just like that, you had two huge armed camps staring each other down.
And, that Franco-Russian alliance, it really shows you just how weird things had gotten. I mean, a democratic republic teaming up with a super repressive czarist regime, it was a true odd couple. So what brought them together? It really boils down to two things. A shared, absolutely overwhelming fear of Germany's military, and, you guessed it, money. Huge French loans were funding Russian factories and railroads. So yeah, fear and money, a pretty potent mix.
But here's the thing, all this political chess wasn't happening in some quiet, isolated room. The whole vibe, the entire culture of Europe was changing. It was getting more aggressive, more militaristic. People started to not just expect a war, but in some cases they actually wanted one. So what was feeding this war fever? Well, you had this mad dash for colonies, the scramble for Africa, which created constant tension. You had this super aggressive type of nationalism called jingoism, where military power was everything. Then there was the naval race. Britain and Germany were locked in this insanely expensive competition to build bigger and badder battleships. Why? Because ruling the waves meant ruling the world. And underneath it all was this idea of social Darwinism, this belief that nations were like animals in the jungle, in a constant survival of the fittest battle. And war was just the ultimate test of who was strongest.
But for the guys planning France's military strategy, there was another problem. Something even more fundamental and, honestly, terrifying. It all came down to simple math, demographics. And just look at this chart. It lays it all out so clearly. See France's birth rate? It's tiny. Now look at Germany's. And then look at Russia's. It's off the charts. French generals knew exactly what this meant. In a long, drawn-out war, they would literally run out of men to fight Germany by themselves. So having powerful allies like Russia wasn't just a smart move, it was a matter of national survival. Absolutely essential.
All this tension and anxiety, it was so thick you could feel it. And it even started showing up in pop culture, in this really weird genre of books, future war novels.
And what's really fascinating is who they thought the bad guy was going to be. In the 1890s, there was this popular British novel that imagined a war, not with Germany, but with their old rival, France. And the plot is just hilarious. It's French soldiers, disguised as waiters, who sneak into England through a secret tunnel under the English Channel, and their weapons hidden under their napkins. I'm not making this up. It sounds ridiculous, but it tells you exactly who the British public was worried about back then.
But fast forward just 10 years or so, and the villain in these books completely changes. Suddenly, it's not sneaky French waiters anymore, it's giant German battleships bombing the English coast. Popular fiction was basically acting like a mirror, reflecting the huge diplomatic shift that was happening in the real world. Germany was now public enemy number one.
Okay, so let's recap. By 1914, the stage is completely set. The house of cards is built and teetering. The alliances are locked in place, the armies have their plans ready to go, and the public has been primed for a big fight. All it needed was one tiny spark to set the whole thing off.
And that spark, of course, came in Sarajevo. After the assassination, Germany made what was probably the single most important decision of the crisis. They gave their ally, Austria-Hungary, what's now famous as the blank check. Basically, they said, whatever you decide to do to Serbia, we've got your back no matter what. It was a total green light for war.
And from that moment, the dominoes just fell, one after another, with this terrifying, unstoppable speed. The assassination leads to the blank check. The blank check emboldens Austria-Hungary to go after Serbia. That forces Russia, Serbia's big brother protector, to start mobilizing its massive army. For Germany, Russia's mobilization was a ticking clock. Their whole war plan, the Schlieffen Plan, depended on knocking out France fast before Russia was ready. And the only way to do that was to march through neutral Belgium. And the second they stepped foot in Belgium, that was it. That guaranteed Britain would enter the war. The entire house of cards came crashing down.
It's a moment that the British Foreign Secretary, Sir Edward Grey, summed up with this absolutely chilling line. He said the lights were going out all over Europe and that they wouldn't be lit again in their lifetime.
So here's the most important thing to take away from all this. That assassination in Sarajevo, it didn't cause World War I. Not really. It was just the trigger. It was the match thrown into a powder keg that had been filled over decades, a keg full of these rigid alliances, intense rivalries, and a culture that had started to think war wasn't just possible, but maybe even necessary. The House of Cards was always going to fall. It was just a matter of who or what would give it that final push.